Faults of Fools by K.D. Blackburn, Chapter 6, in its entirety. A quick peek into Elena's room revealed she was still sleeping. Anna Maria decided a few minutes more wouldn't hurt, especially since recent events had reintroduced her to the operation of the coffee maker. She was spooning Saturday morning's ration of cold cereal into her mouth, with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette appropriately folded for a single-handed reading, when her eyes caught the item. She nearly choked on her cornflakes. The piece on page 3 cast shadows, aspersions, and innuendos over the action and intentions of City Councilwoman Anna Maria Kroc. With great personal pride, she held herself painstakingly conscientious when it came to city council business. Behind her back, but with her knowledge, her colleagues had been known to call her pain-in-the-ass-takingly conscientious. The bookkeeping department knew her to be a woman who made the effort to subtract the cost of the meal from the price of the charity event and only deduct the difference on her taxes. However, that was not what was being presented in the story. What was printed was an absolute distortion of the way she conducted city council business. The real pisser was that somehow Arthur Huffnagel had managed to manipulate the media in an attack on her before she had done it to him. Last Monday, outside the chambers in a private conversation meant to be overheard, she had mentioned that she was thinking of retiring. But she had let out was planning on a midterm campaign to replace herself with her younger brother, the man who rescued children from blazing schoolrooms, the certifiable hero, a perfect shoe-in if there ever was one, she breathed in what amounted to a stage whisper. She had meant Arthur Huffnagel to hear every word. It had been her first warning to him. She had planned to corral him into a quiet corner of chambers, naming the contracts laying on Thaddeus's coffee table as reason enough for him to resign. But then Elena took ill. Anna Maria hadn't shown up to do city business, nor to do Arthur Huffnagel any bit of business either, for that matter. Her inaction allowed him to get the drop on her. No, she fumed, this was not working out the way she'd planned. It was supposed to be his name being lambasted in print, not hers. And then Thaddeus wasn't cooperating. It made her doubly angry. After lucklessly fishing in her pink robe pocket for a Kleenex, Anna Maria left the table in search of one. The box in the kitchen had been empty for days. On her way back, she was surprised to find a bathrobed and slippered Elena bending over the table reading the paper. Oh, it heartened her greatly to think that her sister was coming back to life, and much sooner this time. Without interrupting the scene, she turned to head back up the stairs toward her room and to privately phone Thaddeus to make one more pitch. Without a cup of coffee at her elbow and a lit cigarette in her hand, Elena felt she'd come to meet the morning paper in a state of serious undress. The words under her gaze were upsetting enough that she forgot to sit down the way one does when you're across the table from a close friend and you want them to dish. Never for a single moment in her entire life did Elena find herself envious of her supremely capable older sister, or her prestigious career. The original campaign to get Anna Maria elected had been an almost unbearable stretch for Elena. Everything inside of her recoiled from that idea. She abhorred the knocking on doors and talking to strangers, but it had been required. Debts owed must be paid, no matter the costs. The personal travail of getting her sister elected had delivered her from some of her personal indebtedness. Once on the council, Elena would sit for as long as her sister would willingly give breath to the blow-by-blow retelling of the closed chamber events. After a close reading of the next morning's daily politics page in the morning newspaper, she'd balance the two. She always came down on Anna Maria's side. End of story. As far as she was concerned, what was printed here was not the end of the story. After a closed office door chat with a council member yesterday, the City Beat reporter had been aimed to the bookkeeper's office for additional background information to complete a piece for the Saturday edition. In the way of goodbye at the end of the exclusive interview, the councilman asked after the employee with the recently acquired job in the city-county building. Huffnagel couldn't remember the girl's name or where she worked, but he knew the reporter knew it just fine. The bookkeeper, recommended as the source by the councilman, had answered the reporter's inquiries truthfully. As far as the man's extra sense could tell, whenever he entered City Hall, he paid attention to that tickle, the one that tells a good investigative reporter that he's being fed a lie, although he doesn't know what the lie is, what it is covering, or why. In response to his request for verifiable information, Mrs. Dolores Haggerty had redlined a number of expenses vouched by Councilwoman Anna Maria Kroc, referring to computer printouts for specific numbers. It occurred to him that with a longer lead time before publication and the unfettered inclination to dig, the story he was being nudged to write could possibly have a different angle. But there was a deadline and the pressure of a finger. With one eye on Mrs. Haggerty and one eye on his notebook, the reporter still had space in his visual sweep of the room to notice the other bookkeeper in the office. The woman behind the nameplate reading Donna Lehman fidgeted, squirmed, and dropped things. He wrote down her name on the upper corner of a page and then circled it. A killer offense was Arthur's go-to. He prided himself that in most cases, one encounter was enough. Kroc was a tough old bag. What he had to do, beating up an old lady in public while looking like a paragon of virtue, was difficult, but doable for a man of his talents. Over his coffee, Huffnagel's eyes scanned for the distillation of yesterday's interview with the Post-Gazette. A thorough reading revealed it to be a perfect piece of non-libelous character assassination. Lila cleared the breakfast table and then began her share of the chores. In time, Arthur finished with the newspaper, put it in the recycling pile, and began work on his duties. He'd helped Lila around the house since when they were first married. The whole time she was a stay-at-home mom, he was diligent about sharing the household workload, and more so once she got her job. He did not want a wife who was cranky from overwork and inattention. He wanted Lila to be as she had been when they first met, gentle, trusting, sweet-tempered. Most of all, he wanted her to love him. Today, like most Saturdays, they would go someplace together. Shopping, browsing in the library, anywhere they didn't have to rush around. This afternoon it was to Phipps Conservatory in Oakland, and then to lunch. He had the Union Grill in mind, a place with waiters, metal flatware, and softer lights. They wouldn't eat in silence either. They weren't like some old married couples talked out years ago. Arthur was an attentive lover, world-wise and intelligent. On Saturday afternoons he courted silver-haired Lila, and on Saturday evenings he made sweet, gentle love to his wife of 30-odd years. After which Lila would tell him how lucky she was to have him as a husband. In the space of the last week, Kimberly had escalated through, "My house is your house. You gave me a home, and now I owe you one. Why should I have to wait until you're old and disabled to enjoy having you live with me? You need looking after. I'm all you have." And gone all the way to, "You have no place else to go." At times, when she was incommunicado in Eastern Europe, Eileen had almost forgotten the reasons behind the bolt she'd done, but the past couple of weeks had brought it all back, loud and clear. She couldn't say that her child had wrecked her marriage, but the balance sure hadn't been right. Child and mother against father. That sort of arrangement is typical when Daddy is a beast. But Mike Bryan wasn't a bad man at all. Just a man excluded by Kimberly. It was always Kimberly front and center, and she hadn't been enough to put a stop to it. So Mike had opted to lead a separate life. He fought fires, hung out with firefighters, and now, Eileen knew, courted a woman with a happy family of well-adjusted children. Yesterday, Kimberly had implied it was somehow a failure on her mother's part that her father and that woman were expecting a baby. Puzzling. Eileen couldn't even guess what Kimberly wanted. Did she blame them for being their only child? They hadn't had any more kids for a lot of different reasons, although none of them were biological. Was she angry because now she thought her father was replacing her? Now it seemed to Eileen that, aside from the grip she wanted on her, Kimberly's attention was zeroing tightly, mightily, on Toby. His entire waking time was spent within his mother's reach. Somehow, in some indefinable way, Kimberly clearly discouraged anyone from touching her baby. In nearly 4 weeks, Eileen could only remember picking him up once. To top it off, she had noticed Kimberly had quit asking her husband domestic questions and was erecting the same sort of fence that she had done at home, only this time it was a barrier to exclude her husband rather than her father. What was I thinking? Eileen railed at herself. 3 long years out of her clutches, and I run smack dab right back into them. This time, Eileen promised herself, it would work out differently. Assertiveness training class, as offered by Allegheny County Community College, had started last week. By the measure of the rest of the students, Eileen had looked like a wild adventurer when she gave her classmates a 1-minute spiel of personal history. Shrugging off their comments, she had replied, "It's an act. Underneath, I'm solid marshmallow." She hadn't added that her only child had the intensity of a blowtorch. This could be construed as the first test of my new resolve, Eileen thought. She tried mentally chanting useful phrases like, "I am in charge of my own destiny." Anything was worth a try if it would stop her daughter's voice. Kimberly had whined non-stop, boring into her scalp and grinding away as if whatever new defenses she might have laid down. Over the phone, the two of them had agreed they would spend all day together to heal the rift. Kimberly had initiated the call even though it was herself who had stormed out in a huff. Eileen agreed to come for a visit. Now she wondered how well a few hours resistance instruction would fare against lifelong attack practice. "But I'll need a babysitter," beginning her pounce the first moment she detected her mother relaxing her guard. "Why should I pay some stranger to watch your grandchild when you could do it so much better?" "If you don't have a sitter by now, that's your own fault. This baby didn't fall out of the sky, sweetie." Good, solid response. No wavering, she told herself. "I do have a sitter lined up, Mother. Of course I do. But wouldn't it be better if you lived here?" "So I could take care of your baby, your house, and you?" Eileen evaded answering the question with a question. "I'm your mother, not live-in help." Sounded good. Firm. Eileen praised herself. And so it went. For once, Eileen thought she could possibly stand her ground. She didn't capitulate, didn't give up, or give in, but oh, how she wavered. Full in the knowledge, if Kimberly had known she was giving the performance of her life, it would have been a cakewalk.